If there's anything interesting at all here, it's the two differences between Equal Credit Opportunity Act and fair housing. Do you remember it's age and marital status? Age was not protected at all under fair housing, right? I mean, unless you say children under the age of 18, okay? So age is protected. If I'm 98 years old and I qualify for a 30-year loan, they can't deny it to me based on the fact that I'm 98. Now, having said that, marital status is protected under the Credit Act, but marital status is not protected under fair housing. Familial status is protected under fair housing, but not marital status. You with me on that? Okay. So in other words, I don't know if that would come up, but to me, it's the only interesting thing about the Equal Credit Opportunity Act that you can't tell from its name. Closing the transaction was actually chapter 21. Now let me remind you about chapter 21. We did not go over chapter 21 as a chapter. What I said to you, and I still believe this to be the case, chapter 21 you will learn best from doing your math problems, your mini closing statements, your tax prorations, okay? Who pays what? Now, there are charts in chapter 21. If you are so inclined to go memorize them, knock yourself out. But here's what I'm telling you. Seller pays commission, seller pays the deed preparation, and the seller pays excise taxes, right? Okay? Unless we tell you that the seller pays something else, then pretty much everything else is going to be the buyer. Let me give you an example. Do you remember what we said about quitclaim deeds? What was the rule on quitclaim deeds? That's always the seller. If it says quitclaim, you charge it to the seller. If I tell you that a package has to be taken to the a courier package has to be taken to the seller's lender, who do you think should pay that? I mean, clearly that's the seller. That's his stuff. But for the most part, everything else is going to go to the buyer because the buyer is the one that's getting a new loan, survey, appraisal, etc., etc. You feel okay about that?
So commission, excise tax, and what was the third one? Just
deed preparation.
Okay.
Yes, but make sure you write out the whole thing, deed preparation. Because remember, the buyer pays deed recording. You okay with me on that, Deb?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, do you remember how to handle your prorations? Clearly, you can never practice that too much unless you get to the point where you say, I've got this. Tax prorations, September 1st, remember how that applies? If we give you a problem on the exam and it closes before September 1st, we're not even going to tell you whether the taxes have been paid or not. You should assume they have. After September 1st, we have to tell you whether the taxes have been paid or not so that you understand how to handle the proration. Sound right? Okay? And then don't forget, I did not do one of these on the math review, but don't forget about that rent proration. The rent proration, you're buying a house that has a tenant in place. What's today's date? The 19th maybe? February has 30 days, just like every month in our class, okay? Now remember, the 30-day rule, and that's the way it's going to be unless we tell you to use the specific days. We'll tell you a 365-day if we want you to use 365-day method. If not, you're using 30-day per month method. Okay, so we agreed that today was, I forgot what we agreed. The 19th. We're closing on a house today. It has a tenant in it. I am the buyer. Am I entitled to any of the rent?
Yes.
Where is that rent currently? It's in the seller's pocket. It's in the seller's pocket because he was the owner as of the first. How many days worth of rent do you think I deserve as the buyer? 11. The last 11 days. There is no plus one. Okay? The only time plus one applies is in an interim interest, right? So I'm entitled to 11 days. So we are going to debit 11 days from the seller. And how many days are we going to give me? 11 days. Please listen, I'm telling you, this is one of the most missed questions on the exam. A lot of people want to say, debit the seller one number and credit the buyer a different number. It absolutely can't be that answer. Because anytime you take from one and give to the other, it has to be the exact same number. Okay? Slow down on that one. I know we haven't done a lot of different probations, but with that logic, you can get the answer right. Okay? Where does that take us to the top of the next page? Yes, rest fund. And again, I said compare back to truth in lending. purpose to fully inform borrower of settlement costs. How do we do that? The good faith estimate, remember the good faith estimate? There are some things that once the lender tells you what they are, they cannot change. What in that zero tolerance category, what two things can the lender tell you at the time of loan application that should not change? Remember, interest rate is going to be a truth in lending issue. How about your loan origination fees? And how about your discount points? Okay? Once the lender tells you those, they better not change unless you change loans. When, by the way, should you get your early truth in lending and good faith estimate? When should you get your early numbers on truth in lending and good faith estimate? Within 3 days of loan application. Within 3 days of loan application. And you should finally get your, your final TRID documents, which would be your final truth in lending and your closing disclosure. You should get this how many days? 3 days before closing. 3 days before closing.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice. Listen, I want to give you another factoid so that you can say that you heard it. Okay? I think it'd be cheesy questions to ask, but I'll do it anyway. When you're counting 3 days prior to closing, it actually includes Saturday. This is one of the few times that we count Saturday as an actual business day. The TRID, the 3 days for TRID, actually includes Saturday. Not Sunday, not holidays, but it does include Saturdays. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal for test purposes. Just one more factoid, right? You thought your head was as full as it could be. Oh, and then just to round out this little part about RESPA, let me remind you of the 3 things that the RESPA requires of the lender: the good faith estimate, the brochure, the settlement cost brochure, okay, and then of course certain things have to be closed on the CD. I actually put most loans closed on PUD 1. Oh, okay, I see. Closing disclosure as of October 3rd. The year I wrote this was the year that they were changing. So closing disclosure is now the way you would get most of this. If you have a federally related loan, I promise you it's going to be on the CD, not the HUD one. RESPA is also a law that prohibits kickbacks. Y'all remember that? Prohibits kickbacks between settlement service providers. If you really wanted to go deep on this one, you'd say you can never, ever receive a kickback from a settlement service provider. But can agents receive kickbacks from service providers? Yes, as long as it is fully and timely disclosed and reduced to writing at the appropriate time. Okay? But not settlement service. Oh, and then this note here, just to remind you, we don't talk much about the Good Funds Settlement Act, but this is the act I went over when we were going over the contract, and it basically said, hey, attorneys, don't disperse closing funds until when? Closing. And this is what we all believed anyway, but now this act literally says, don't do that. Matter of fact, that's what it says. And then the valuation chapter. This is a big deal, guys. Look, I don't find either finance or valuation to be that difficult. I know it's easy for me to say because I spent a lot of time with it. But there are a bunch of points in finance and valuation. So when you think you know it all, go back and study these chapters just a little bit more. Not because they're hard, just because they're so beat up with points. Obviously, agency and contracts is just eat up with points as well. 28 points on the final on that section having to do with agency and contracts. Okay, but then, I mean, it's chapter 7 through 10, but it's still an important point. In valuation section, you're probably looking at about 8 questions on the exam, and then on the finance, you're probably looking at about 10 to 12 questions on the exam. Big deal, big deal. Valuation, definition of an appraisal, that's an opinion of value based on market facts. Are you, real estate agent, ever going to call your work product an appraisal? No. Are you ever going to describe for someone market value? No. You're not going to use the word market value. You're going to use the word probable sale price, probable sale range. I know it seems like it's semantics, but it's important, okay? basic economic principles of value. This is vocabulary for you guys. Pick yourself up a cheat point here. Basic economic principles of value. Look, go ahead and put a star beside substitution and contribution, and maybe a small star beside conformity. And I want you to be super, super familiar with these. Substitution, all things being equal. Remember, in valuation, we talk in terms of equal utility. I know two houses are not the same, but they can have equal utility. They're both 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, or regular lots, right? Okay, so economic principle of substitution. All things being equal, consumers would rather pay less than more. And why is it so important that we ask you this question on the exam? The economic principle of substitution is the whole theory behind the CMA. In other words, how much someone was willing to pay for Jen's house basically means that another buyer likely would pay the same for a similar house, right? So that's why that's so important. The economic principle of contribution and improvement is only worth the value that it adds to the property. Remember, by now you've seen a ton of valuation questions. And notice how for a half bath it's $1,500, for a full bath $25. I know you can't build one for that amount, but that's how much it adds, that it has one extra pool or one extra half or something to that effect. That's the contribution value. Why is that so important? Because when we were doing our adjustments, we're adjusting based on contribution value, not replacement cost. Make sense? And then conformity to you guys is just a definition. Harmonious use of property leads to the maximizing of property values. That literally is just a definition. Market value. It is important that you know the definition of market value. Even though as an agent, you're not going to use it. Why is market value important? When I start evaluating a property, I want to find properties that have sold that were representative of market value. Meaning that, this is a great test question, when you're selecting comps, be careful. Make sure to pick the best comps. I can use one that's a little bit bigger. I can adjust for square footage. I can use one that maybe has an extra half bath. I can adjust for that. I can use one that has a 2-car or 1-car garage comparatively. Not a big deal there. But don't use a distressed sale. If someone had to leave because of work or illness or the law was after them or something like that, then that is not representative of market value. Market value, well-informed buyer and seller acting without bias. That will produce market value. Remember those words, harmony, transaction, all that stuff? Okay, good. Price is what the market's willing to pay on a given day. Cost is what it takes to produce something. The point I was just trying to make there is to remind you that market value, market price, and market cost are not necessarily the same. Okay. Concepts of value, demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. Gosh, I don't know how to ask a test question on these. Don't discount them, but understand that we're not going to ask you to list anything like that. Demand, somebody's got to want what you have for it to have any value. Utility, it has to be able to satisfy a need. Scarcity, certainly that could affect value. If there's a lot of demand and scarcity, it's obviously going to affect the value. Transferability, you remember on day one, we keep going back to day one. I promise you, if you own real property, you have the right to dispose of it. I can't promise you the ability to dispose of it, okay? Transferability. It has to be transferable to have a value. And then the approaches to value. Here, again, this is where you're putting your star right here. Understanding the approaches to value and the words that go along with the approaches to value. The sales comparison approach, also known as the market data approach. Those are synonyms, right? Sales comparison, market data approach. And importantly, I mean, it's kind of the way you do your CMA as well, right? Does this make sense to you? The sales comparison approach is based on the activity of buyers and sellers in an open market. Does that make sense? Yeah, why do we use it for single-family houses? Not because there's anything special about single-family homes. It's just that there are so many sales of single-family homes. It's easy to compare the actions of buyers and sellers. But you use the sales comparison approach not only on single-family resales, but also on what? Vacant land. Did you notice on the homework this weekend, the homework exam, there was one that tested you on that, okay? Not just single-family homes, but also vacant land. Single-family vacant land, market, that's almost exactly what it is. The cost approach, listen, you're not going to get a ton of questions on the cost approach. Having said that, you recognize cost approach, unique properties. Don't just say commercial properties, make sure you say unique properties. Because all commercial properties will not use the cost approach, and all properties that use the cost approach will not be commercial properties. I think I used an example of an unusual house in Oakwood as an example of when cost approach might be used. A lot of vocabulary here, a lot of vocabulary. Pick yourself up a cheat point on the vocabulary. In the cost approach, we have to evaluate the value of the improvement and the land separately, and then you add them together. The depreciated value of the improvement plus the land value equals the property value, okay? When it comes to depreciating the property, remember these words. The replacement cost. What would it take to replace that property today using today's materials, labor, etc., etc.? Replacement cost. Then, we know that that's not a new building. So to what it costs today, we need to depreciate that. We're going to ascribe to this property, what's the word for the period of time which the property would have some profitable use? The economic or the useful life. Those words are interchangeable. Economic or useful life. The period of time it would have some profitable use. And then we have to put to it some age. What am I describing if I were to say, this is the age that the building appears to be, given the way it's been kept for these years? The effective age, age, okay? Effective age, economic life, replacement cost. Those are going to be big words in and of themselves. And then, of course, when we talk about methods of depreciation, the age-life method is your homework. I mean, that's your math problem right there, right? The market abstraction method, not a big deal for you guys. We're not going to be doing this anyway. But the breakdown method of depreciation throws in some words that are great test questions, okay? What am I describing if I were to say that the appraiser deducted from this building because it was outdated, it had an outdated floor plan, outdated wiring? It's functional obsolescence, okay? Unfortunately, these are like last-minute words. If you need to just go in last minute and do flashcards on these, that's fine. And then what am I describing if I were to say the reason this property lost value is because an urban center has closed down and all the jobs have gone away. What's that? Economic, also known as external obsolescence. Something changed and I was not able to correct it, right? Which means external obsolescence is always curable or incurable. Incurable. I didn't cause it, so I can't cure it. It's always incurable. And then the one that I didn't speak to was normal wear and tear, physical deterioration. Okay? And then finally, the income approach. In talking about the income approach, what type of properties will we use the income approach? Commercial. Well, I'll say commercial, to be more specific, income producing properties, where the property itself produces the income. Okay? Income producing properties, and there's no way in the world you're not getting a question that has something to do with the following things. So just go ahead and tell me. The amount of money that I could possibly bring in if I collected every dollar in my rental unit is known as what? Gross potential. You never collect everything, so you subtract out your what? Vacancy and credit loss. In other words, vacancy, the ones that are going to be credit loss, the ones that are not going to pay you. Gross potential minus, and look, this might be the test question. Gross potential minus vacancy equals what? Gross effective, that's the amount of money you actually touch. Gross effective minus expenses equals what? Net operating income. And the formula for determining the value of an income producing property is NOI divided by cap rate equals value. Okay, income divided by rate equals value. Okay? And then finally, to get an extra point on the exam, do you remember that once you have the NOI, you did not need the debt service to get the NOI, did you? Not to get the NOI. But if you have the debt service and you need to know the before tax cash flow, you can subtract debt service from NOI, and that will leave you with before tax cash flow. And then finally, problems number 20 and 21 on your math. They were very difficult problems. And on that, what we did is we got your before tax cash flow, divided it by your down payment, and And what it spit out was your return on investment, your first year return on investment. Those are problems number 20 and 21 on your math exam. I gotta be honest with you. The question that is relevant to on the class exam, I actually give you that point. Because there's a really hard math question on there. I'll say do it if you want to. I'm just going to go ahead and give you this point. Because it's extraordinarily hard. It's actually above the level of this class. So that's why I give it to you. You better hope I'm not sick on Wednesday. Because other people are not as kind as I am. You have just finished your review. I just noticed that the investment chapter wasn't on there. But look down at the bottom. Look down at the bottom. Advantages and disadvantages of being an independent contractor versus an employee. Do you remember those? Independent contractor, freedom, unlimited income. Employees, you got to be at work at this particular time. You know exactly how much money you're going to make. On the other hand, as an employee, you get benefits, independent contractor doesn't. And then advantages and disadvantages of sole proprietorship, partnership, and LLC. Basically, these are going to have to do with, as a sole proprietorship, congratulations, you get to keep everything you make if you're a sole proprietor, okay? Downside is you're also responsible for all liabilities associated with the company. LLC, you might have to split money a little bit, but at least you're not going to have the liability because the company takes the liability, not you individually. That's all we're looking for on those type of things. And congratulations, you are now ready for your exam. Are you ready for your exam?
Yes, sir.
I'll go get it. We'll take it right now. My explanation on time. How are we doing on time? 2:15.